In it comes. There goes the shot on goal. It's in. It's in. Jamie Dwyer.
Heavy lifting. Goes up to Graham. Takes the lead. Looks a winner. Draws away from
the Australians have just broken the American stranglehold on this race.
We simply don't have time to go through my next guest's CV. Honestly, if I did it all, you'd get lost in the numbers. So I'll summarise it as best I can. Above everything I'm about to say, she's widely regarded as the greatest track cyclist Australia has ever produced. She's an 11-time world champion. She's competed in 4 Olympic Games. She has 6 Olympic medals. 2 of them are gold. And upon winning bronze in Rio, she became the first Australian to win medals in 4 consecutive Olympic Games. She sits in the Sport Australia Hall of Fame. She has so many incredible stories to tell in this cycling journey, one of them including a broken neck, but still competing in the Olympics 8 months later. We'll get to that. She's an incredible role model for women in sport and a fierce ambassador. She's carried the flag for Australia at the Games, and this series would not have been complete without chatting to her because she is the chef de mission for the Australian team heading to Paris. Anna Meares, thank you so much for being part of our path to Paris.
My pleasure. What a great introduction. Get a little bit of insight to you and why you have the passion for sport, Olympic sport, is great. And I'm really looking forward to our chat. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate that. And exactly right. It probably is some of that background that makes me so passionate about this. How does all that make you feel when you hear those things read back to you?
About my achievements, or it makes me smile because I do forget sometimes. Like, it feels like I've been retired for 8 years, but it feels like a lifetime ago. And it's been a very full lived life. 22 years dedicated to sport, 16 years of that at the elite high performance level. So it's been extensive and long, and I'm still involved in sport at large, but I do have to remind myself of the things that I have done, I think. So thank you.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. And your story is an epic one, Anna, with so many twists and turns, but we will go back right to the start because everybody remembers with so much nostalgia the embryonic moments of falling in love. Where did it start with you and cycling?
Well, my very first memory of bikes was choosing between my little girl's white bike with pink handlebars and spokey dokes and floral basket and the BMX pit bike.
Okay.
And I went from that little girl who just kind of rode around the streets to that little girl who just wanted to tear up the dirt track and do big jumps. So that's probably where it started. I also grew up in the country, so it was, my parents weren't going to drive me to my mate's place, so it was quicker to ride than it was to walk. So bikes was just my normal mode of transportation.
That's absolutely fair. If I ask you too much about your childhood, we'll run out of time for the extraordinary journey which followed. So last one on that, what was it like being a kid for you? What do you remember most and sort of what makes you smile the most when you reflect on your childhood?
I had a huge sense of freedom as a kid growing up in the country in a small coal mining town of Middlemount. If the sun was up, we could be out. And the rule was to be home before it got dark. It was an incredibly safe community to be a part of. And we just went nuts. And I think it was great sense of freedom.
Oh, amazing. Look, let's go to Athens 2004, 21-year-old Anna Meares. These were a special games for a few of our athletes in this series, actually. Jamie Dwyer springs to mind. He hit the golden goal for the Kookaburras, and that was their first gold medal. But these, I suspect, will be in your heart forever because you realised an Olympic dream at 21, winning the gold medal in the 500-metre time trial. What are your memories of Athens 2004?
Yeah, there's a mixed bag of memories. I had to compete against my sister for the spot to get on the team. And we, as you know, there's so much dedication and commitment for an athlete just to make the team, let alone be able to pull it together on competition day. So that was a big one for me, was, having to compete against my sister. But Athens was just, I felt like I was this kid that got plucked from the lounge room and put inside a TV. It felt so surreal to be inside the Olympic environment, walking into the village, seeing all the colours, all the nations, all the team uniforms. It was overwhelming. It was sensory overload. It was it was Greece, it was Athens. This was where the games were born. There was so much history, and to be there was really amazing. I remember my race in very small portions. I don't recall a lot of it, but there are very special moments right throughout those games, from the arrival to departure, let alone just performance. So the one thing I do remember is my race was 2 laps on the velodrome, and I did 6 laps in victory because I couldn't get off the track. So.
do you, like, that must have been euphoric then? Like, if you're doing six laps of, lapping it up, is that something that you recall pretty vividly?
Yeah. I was just like in holy shit mode, like I'm Olympic champion. Like, what do I do? No one tells you what to do when you win, right? Yeah. So I was lapping it up. My coach was like, "Oh, come on, you got to come in this lap. Oh, come on, Miss Anna, come on. It's time to come in." So, it was an crazy environment.
Oh, that's awesome. The 500 time trial, that was sort of your pet event, right? Like the one you enjoyed the most?
Yep. Loved it. It was a real... gave me the ability to try and create perfection in sporting competition, because it was all about technique. It was all about application of self. It's all about trying to wring as much out of your body as possible without the influence of another athlete, and that's why I really liked it. Still wasn't too shabby at the individual sprint, but much preferred the time trial, that's for sure.
Look, I'm slightly going off course there, but when you talk to me about the pursuit of perfection, that is something that I'm always fascinated about, speaking to, our past Olympic champions, our aspiring Olympic champions. The concept of perfection, is it a dangerous one? I mean, I speak, obviously a non-elite athlete, but perfection for me has been dangerous. It's been this standard that I can never achieve. And only recently have I sort of worked on that. But what's the concept of perfection done for you?
I have really changed my relationship and my outlook on perfection, and I tend to call bullshit on perfection, and I see imperfection as perfection a lot of the time now. It's basically because I went from being an athlete who tried to control so much that restricted my ability to actually go out and allow myself growth and potential to continue to improve. So my relationship with perfection has certainly changed over time. But it's the notion of this structured, constant, routined environment that tends to create that, and this desire to try and be the best, and that best level is where we see perfection, but there is still room to grow past being the best. It's your own personal progression, which is most important.
I'm so glad I asked you about that, because for me, it was just this thing where if you constantly have to be here, but you can never get there. And even if you manage to get there, the bar seems to move and you can never reach it. It's sort of created a feeling of emptiness.
Yeah. And in some ways you can start feeling like you're chasing your tail in a circle, and that sense of achievement might never actually be fully appreciated or gained. And so acknowledgement, mindfulness, awareness, presence is more important, I think, now than perfection. But at the time, I didn't know that. I was a young 20-year-old from country Queensland who was all about trying to be Olympic champion.
Yeah. So your pet event, obviously, Athens went amazingly. What was the feeling like when you found out it was being removed from the program for Beijing?
Yeah, I was really upset. I was really angry. I was confused. I didn't understand it. I couldn't understand how to grow one sport, you cut another one. So I was really emotional, which is just, if you don't know me, that's my tendency. I can be quite emotional, both in good and bad ways.
Aren't we all?
But at the end of the day, it was out of my control, and I had to really focus on where I could put my energy and my ability to still go out and race and compete and improve myself to get to the Olympic Games. So to explain, the 500 and the men's kilometre time trials were cut from the track program to bring in 2 medals of BMX racing, one for men, one for women. And that's because the IOC deemed that cycling is one sport which, encompasses mountain bike, track, road, BMX. So there are enormous number of medals across those disciplines, but each discipline is really a different sport. So I loved the fact that BMX was coming into the Olympic Games. I didn't like the fact that I paid a price for it, and the women sprinters paid a price for it, and that would be corrected ultimately leading into London in 2012 and every game since.
Yeah, it would have been tough, particularly given it was your pet. Anna, from how I was raised and from my experiences, like, I sort of believe we learn far more from the things that go wrong in life than the things that go right. You're an Olympic champion. Beijing is 7 months away. And in the World Champs, you crash and break your neck. It's incredible just sort of saying it out loud. So much to ask you about this. But I suppose above all, do you look back on the accident as a moment that made you stronger?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a moment that I think defined my career. And in that way, I mean that you can see my career pre-accident and post-accident. Pre-accident, I won 2 of my 11 world titles. Post-accident, I won 9 of those 11. And that's because I went through this incredible roller coaster of rehabilitation and reflection as well. And often it's not until something is potentially taken from you that you realize how much value and purpose you attach to it. And my gratitude and my outlook and attitude changed completely from having that accident. I learned about my strengths and weaknesses, where I was very strong and some areas weak in others. I realized even though I had been world and Olympic champion, I was operating so far under my full capacity that I was excited and I knew would be quite scary to other people. And athletes who go through significant accidents and significant injuries and find it within themselves to come back are dangerous, because they have that shift in perspective as a result of the experience they went through. And I think that's what happened for me as a result of my accident.
It's a fascinating insight, honestly. And, reading up about that, it baffled my mind. I finish all my interviews in this series with the same 2 questions. I'm kind of jumping the gun with one of them here, but it makes sense to sort of touch on it. But you remarkably made it to Beijing. You won a silver medal. So for me, like, overcoming the physical and mental battles to get there, that's a win of monumental proportions. Like, I sort of look at that as externally, without knowing the battle that you went through, that's a gold medal. Did it feel like this for you? Did it feel like a win despite not winning the gold?
Wow. No, it didn't.
Wow.
It did not. I remember crossing the finish line, and to win the silver, you lose the gold medal race off, right? So I was competing against Victoria Pendleton for that gold medal. And I was basically annihilated in that final. She beat me by 50, 60 meters. I was not competitive. And that's not a nice way to win a silver medal. But then when I kind of gave myself a little bit of reprieve and time to just process what had just happened, I realized it wasn't necessarily disappointment. It was more relief that I was feeling from the sheer almost intensity of going through the accident and the rehabilitation and still making Beijing happen to actually getting to the outcome point. And I do reflect on that silver medal. I call it my white gold, my white gold medal. And even though it's not gold, it definitely is one of the most prolific achievements of my career.
Yeah, that's amazing. So it sounds like it took you a little bit of time for that understanding to sort of set in.
Yeah, well, as an athlete, you want to win.
Yeah.
Everything that you do and your desire and your efforts and your dedication is all about trying to be that best person at the end of the day, that one in the world that gets to stand on that top podium. And I don't know too many athletes that will tell you it doesn't hurt if you don't achieve that. It's natural instinct, to have that response. So it does take a little bit of time and distance emotionally to really appreciate sometimes what you have achieved and how big an achievement that is.
Oh, that's fascinating. I touched off the top, Anna, on my upbringing. And so mum being heavily involved in athletics, like I have a soft spot for athletics. So maybe I watch it
Yeah.
a little bit more than the average Joe. But even still, it's every 4 years we get the opportunity to watch it for 1 week in saturation. And, lots of people will watch the athletics and just be completely engulfed in it. Same as sort of cycling, right? We don't get to watch it that often. And then once every 4 years, people are like, oh, how cool is this? As I was sort of preparing, I then reflected on all the Olympic Games I watched as a kid and then sort of growing, as a teen. And I remembered as I was preparing to chat to you, one name popped up, Victoria Pendleton. And I was like, oh my God, I remember watching these fierce battles, like, once every 4 years with Anna Meares and Victoria Pendleton. Like, I remember this so much. And then the more you read about it, the more you're like, yes, I remember this rivalry. This was incredible. Like, sort of the world's 2 best cyclists. How do you reflect on the rivalry between yourself and Victoria Pendleton?
Yeah, it was intense, that's for sure. And it was intense because you just had the perfect concoction of ingredients possible. Aussie versus Brit, home Olympics at the London 2012 Games for Pendleton, rivalry, it just had everything you could ask for in terms of a storyline, right?
And the media made it that
was
way
pretty
too.
Yeah. And it was at times very difficult to just feel like I could survive, let alone compete. Wow. What I'm grateful for upon reflection, despite everything that happened, is that Vicky and I could both walk away from London with an Olympic gold medal, albeit we won the Olympic title in each other's world championship discipline. I was the world Keirin champ. She became the Olympic champ in that, and she was the world sprint champ, and I became the Olympic champ in that. We were 2 female athletes that took our sport to another level, and our sport was a spotlighted event at the London Olympic Games, and I'm really proud to have been one half of that rivalry that created that and generated that interest in our sport.
Yeah.
I never want to feel what I felt on that start line of that gold medal final against Pendleton ever again. It actually lended to me steering away from sport a lot when I retired after Rio, because I struggled to walk back into environments where the stress and anxiety and pressure and expectation and hope was so incredibly high. And that just took some time for me to get my head around and my heart around. And I'm glad that I did, because I think I'm better positioned now to be able to help the next generation of athletes heading to Paris as chef de mission because of that experience.
Can we go back to that start line at London? What exactly was it that you were feeling?
Every physical instinct in my body was telling me to unclip and run, get out of the stadium and leave. And I mentally had to control myself and my instinct to remain in control, to listen to my coach, to go through all the preparation plans that we had done tactically, strategically, and back myself to be able to go into a pretty hostile environment and execute a race plan better than the best in the world. And it was that, in some ways, it was the hope of 2 nations for millions of people wanting each of us to come home with that medal, and only one of us could. And from my side, I desperately wanted that. Of course, Victoria did as well. But yeah, it was it was really overwhelming, the physical response that I had sitting on that start line. Like, if you watch the footage, you'll just see I'm got my mirrored visor on. You don't see a lot of facial expression, but you see I'm just taking big, deep breaths, and that's the only thing that I could do at that time to try and remain calm.
Yeah. Oh, that is crazy. Can you tell me about the noise that you experienced in the velodrome?
Yeah, it was incredibly loud, and I was grateful for having a test event in that velodrome a few months beforehand, because it was one of the only velodromes that had the roof that concaved in over the track as opposed to going up and over. So all the noise channeled into the pit and into the track. It was the noisiest velodrome that I'd ever been a part of. It actually made communicating with my coach very difficult. And we changed all of our training preparation in those few months leading into London. We put crowd noise over the speakers of the Adelaide Superdrome. We learned how to communicate without verbal communications because we knew that was going to be a challenge on comp day. And we put every stressor available at every training session to try and make normal environment as possible for what was we were anticipating for London. So my ears were bubbling by the time I left that stadium, and it just was so loud that it took a few hours for my hearing to come back to normal. Yeah. I felt like I'd been at a concert for hours.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Look, I suppose we've sort of done it in the reverse, but I want to hear about the build up. So again, have read a lot, have heard some stories, but the build up to London, you're obviously heading over to Victoria's turf to try and take down the world's best. You trained with every inch of your physical, and what fascinated me was your mental being. Because I'm intrigued to hear about the book that you and your coach has developed called Know Thy Enemy. Like, talk about mental preparation. This sounds incredible.
Yeah, it does. This is where team becomes really important, and I appreciate I'm looked at as an individual athlete, but I fit into a much larger team, and my team helped me get every piece of information required and then let me go to execute at the end of the day. And to change the silver outcome in Beijing to a potential gold outcome in London, we had to change the process and application in between. It clearly wasn't working for success to occur against Pendleton. So Know Thy Enemy actually came from the Japanese samurai, which is not necessarily about knowing your opponent, but knowing yourself through study of your opponent. So that Pendleton wasn't going to get worse. She was only going to get better. So I had to be the one prepared to make changes and also learn how to upskill myself so that I could continue to be not just surviving in that environment, but competitive against the best. So in that, we analysed Pendleton and we watched a lot of race footage, broke it down to stat data, pie graphs, line graphs, percentages, because that's the way that I learn. I'm a visual learner. And so I could actually take the information and understand what my coaches were trying to get me to understand in what her strengths and weaknesses were, how that then applied to my skill set, where I fell short in my toolbox, so to speak. And then we spent 3 years building new tools in my toolbox so that I could go out and compete against Pendleton. The long and the short of it is that we analysed that when Pendleton was in the back position, meaning she had an opponent in front of her, she was enormously successful. That was her most favoured position. But when she was in the front position, looking at an opponent behind her, it was her least successful. Yeah. So we wanted to capitalise on that. And that's where the track stand skill came into play. We tested it a year and a half out from the Olympics when we met in the semi-final at the World Titles to see if she could do it, to see how it would play out. And that would be the first time I would win a world sprint title. And Pendleton, I think, was the first time in 6 years that she wouldn't. We had shown our hand early, so now we were waiting for counter strategies of the strategy. But I didn't use that skill again until I met her in the gold medal final a year and a half later. We threw out every other plan possible to her assessment team. We just basically came down to practicing behind closed doors with a teammate, Alex Bird, every day, in readiness for the dress rehearsal runs. And then on game day, pull out a strategy that no one domestically or internationally had seen me do in a year and a half, because we knew that was our best chance of beating the best in the world. Pendleton and I met in the semi-final at the World Championships a few months before the London Games. My coach asked me if I wanted to use this track stand because the world title was on the line, and I said no. I know I need that for London, and I lost that world title.
Yeah.
But a few months later, I was able to win the Olympic title.
A worthwhile sacrifice, I reckon. Do you know what? This I think this is what will fascinate people: is the the cat and mouse of cycling. Like
Yeah.
I think people look at it and they go, well, whoever's fastest will win, or whoever's trained the hardest,
Yeah.
but we've just heard
Yeah.
the most unbelievable, what would you call it, 2.5 years build up of strategy. Like that
Yeah.
is fascinating.
Yeah.
That's fascinating for me.
Well, that's why I stayed in the sport so long, because even though the sprint event doesn't change, your opponents do. See, they bring different strengths and weaknesses. So the analytical side of the competition for me, I absolutely loved. And one of the most asked questions I got when I retired was, why is your event called the sprint when you go so slow? And for people who tune in once every 4 years, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So when I had the chance to commentate the Tokyo Games, I really loved explaining that to win the sprint, you've got to go through qualification, a series of 12 races against 6 different people. So you have to be very strategic about what energy you expend and what moves you make early, because it's about fatigue management so that you can get to the end rounds as cleanly as possible, but with the most energy to expend at that point. But you don't want to get caught out early on, soft pedaling and not make it in the end. So there's a real decision-making element to track cycling.
The way you've articulated that is incredible. So thank you so much for that. And I reckon those who aren't familiar with cycling will find that fascinating as well. I think it's brilliant. I suppose it's along the same lines. They say, what is it? They say it takes 10,000 hours to master a skill. So I'm not sure what 20,000 hours would mean, because my understanding is that the amount of time you put into training between 2004 and 2014 was 20,000 hours, all to shave off 1 second from a PB. Is that, first of all, I hope I've got those numbers right, but how does it feel equating 20,000 hours to 1 second?
I hadn't actually equated it to 20,000 hours. What I had equated it to was at my first games in Athens at 20 years of age in 2004, I rode a world record at 33.952 seconds.
Yeah.
And 10 years later, at the age of 30, I would lower that mark to 32.836 and a new world record to be the first to ride a sub 33 second time trial. And as I look back on my career, I realize that's a 1 second improvement in 10 years. And when you break that down, that is a 1/10 of a second improvement every year for 10 years. So when you talk about consistency and persistence, I can't think of a better story or example to give, because when you consider that races are won and lost by 1/1000th of a second, on the day, a 10th of a second might not seem like a big margin or a big win or a big improvement, but over a long period of time, those small margins add up. And in sport, small margins are actually far bigger than many people give them credit for. So, another very good example of that is the women's athletics sprinters, with Melinda Gainsford-Taylor being the Australian record holder, through to Mel Breen, through to now Tori Lewis. And through that generational shift of 3 athletes over more than a decade, there has only been 0.02 of a second shift in that time. It was broken by Mel Breen by 1/100th of a second, and then broken by Tori again by 1/100th of a second. So when you consider how hard it is to make improvements at that high end of performance, it's pretty remarkable.
And I think that's something else. That's why I wanted to ask you that, because people are about to watch the Olympic Games, whether it's athletics or cycling, probably the 2 sports in particular, where those margins can mean everything to an athlete. But those who are watching, who aren't as familiar with the sports, they're once every 4-year watchers are like, oh, that's cool. They went a little bit quicker than that other person. But that is, for you, a 10-year journey. Like, that's what I think is amazing and really important to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And also too, it's pertinent to the performance on the day, isn't it? It's hard to get it right with one chance every 4 years on that one day. And you talk about pressure. There's not much bigger pressure than that.
For sure. Hey, apparently we have, just to sort of go a little lighter for a second, apparently we've got one major aspect of our lives in common. I am a ridiculous sweet tooth. And it's so
Hey.
bad. I'll be completely honest. Like, it's bad. It's bad. I'm probably addicted. But I'm told that you're a huge chocolate fan.
Yes, I am. Very, very much so. But I actually gave it up for a year leading into London. Can you imagine?
Which is what I was going to
And
ask you about.
I did
Yep.
it. Yeah, yeah. And I did it because I wanted to challenge my self-discipline to remind myself on a simple decision every day to say no to chocolate, to remind myself about what I was making all these hard decisions and dedicating myself for at the end. And I wanted to have my cake and eat it too. So ultimately I did. I got my gold in bronze in London and a massive pile of chocolate that family and friends had bought and sent over. And I tried my hardest to work through that. Oh man, I was sick. I was so sick. But I kept going. I'm a dedicated person. I ate it all. It cured me for a little while, that's for sure.
So what's your go-to chocolate? Like, what's your favourite?
I've got a few. The Hague's speckles are probably my favourite.
Wow.
I love an Arnott's mint slice. I'm a bit partial to a Kit Kat, a cherry ripe, and a Mars bar. But it doesn't, I just like the plain chocolate, plain milk chocolate.
Yeah. That's me. No, I'm a Cadbury man, and dairy milk, love it. But so are you saying that you, like, of course there was probably partly a health benefit, but was this more a mental test for you leading up to London?
Yeah, totally mental. That's the only reason I did it. I was already well and above on my nutrition plans and things like that. But this was one thing that mentally I knew I needed a reminder for daily, because I was going up against the best in the world and I had to make sure I was on my game. Yeah.
Oh man, I need that. I need your help to try and stop.
Could you go a week without chocolate? Try a year. And it's in a lot of things.
It is. I'm embarrassed to say this. So when I was teaching, the colleagues in my department were like, "You need to give it up for just try a week." I was like, "Cool." I started on Monday morning, and it got to Friday afternoon. I was like, "That's a week. That's a working week." They were like, "No, that doesn't count. That doesn't count." Oh my goodness. Anyway, I'll give it a go. The other aspect I'd love to talk about is we did touch on it slightly, but the concept of perfection and failure. So I suppose, Anna, I ask all my questions today with the context that I bring. So I've been a bit of a perfectionist trying to reach this unreachable standard, which I told you about, and I've only started dealing with that in the past year, which has been a really, really good insight. Any hint of failure sort of broke me. And a relationship breakdown is one that hit particularly hard. Of course, I learned so much from that, and I am really grateful for that journey now. So I wanted to give you that context as to why I asked this question to you. And I hope it's okay I do. Feel free to veto it. But what impact did your marriage separation have on you? And how did it sort of shape you as a person?
Yeah, it's a good question. It hurt me a lot. And when you personally are struggling and you hit a real low, it can be really hard to still function in life generally, let alone professionally. I think my sport saved me, my team saved me in a lot of ways, because they gave me somewhere to go every day, to be around supportive people, gave me a distraction, and gave me a place to be, where in every other aspect of my life I felt very unstable and very lost. It shook me for a long time, because it just made me question so many things. And when emotion is a part of it and you attach your personal self achievements to it, it can be really debilitating. So I think I have grown significantly as a result of it. And unfortunately, time is one of those measures that's independent for everyone. It can be a short measure for some. It can be an extensively long measure for others, and it's incredibly frustrating because you just want it fixed now, make me feel better. But it just doesn't happen like that. And like broken bones, when the weather changes, it aches, and you get a reminder every now and then. But I just try to stay as true to myself as possible and be as kind to myself as possible, which is really hard to do at times, especially when you're dealing with adversity, change, failure, loss, those sorts of things. But that's when you really have to have key people around you that what sort of support they can offer you. For instance, you're not going to go to someone who's very good at giving you a pep talk when you just want a hug and someone to sit in it with you, right? You just don't want to be picked up. You just want to be given a hug to be acknowledged what you're feeling at that time. So, choosing the right people around you is really important, and remembering that you have people around you. You're not alone in, one, this experience, but two, in your life. You have great people that are there for you. And I had great people there for me as well. I'm very grateful for my coach, for my manager at that time, my family, my friends. But yeah, it was a really tough period. I believed that I was going to be resigned to becoming a foster parent, rescuing beagles and having a big block of land and just living my life large like that. And eventually, when I stopped wallowing in my misery, I ran into an amazing man who convinced me a few years later to marry him. And now we have a lovely life and family and 2 young children. And I would never have thought that would happen at that point when my first marriage broke down. So, it's hard to sit in those low moments, but if you can work your way through it, there is a light at the end of the tunnel and there is a way out.
I am so grateful for you, for you sharing that, because it's hard. And life can be hard. And so very unbelievably grateful for you to share that concept so openly, because despite being an elite athlete, you are also a human. And I think that is what I suppose when we watch you on the TV, I think that's what people forget. And I mean you. Yes, and Meares, but any athlete on TV, like they are this elite athlete, they are the things that happen in life. And so I really appreciate you sharing that openly and honestly, because, it is hard. I was so thrilled when I read about your journey into motherhood. You touched on it at the end there with your partner, Nick. How has motherhood changed your perspective on life?
Majorly. It has made me ring my parents a couple of times and apologize and also say thank you because I had absolutely no appreciation for what they went through, what they did. Yeah, I didn't even realize my parents grew up. I didn't consider that they got tired, that money was a stress. I never considered the perspective of life from a parent's point of view. I never considered what it was like when my mum got that phone call when I broke my neck. I never considered what it was like for them to sit in the stands in London and absorb that anxious environment. I still to this day swear like the day I became a mum was better than any title or any achievement I achieved in my athletic career. My daughter Evelyn is a carbon copy of me. It's exhausting. I feel like I'm, talking to a mirror. I'm working so hard not to quash her character and her spirit. And if she doesn't end up as an elite athlete, I will be very surprised. She's super competitive. But it also gives me great perspective too on the simple things in life. As children are blank canvases, and you realize the impact you have in shaping them. You realize it's not their choice to come into this world. It's yours. It's your responsibility as that parent to offer as much as possible in a positive way for those children to be influenced, not just in their upbringing, but on their surrounding community and their friends and their lives going forward. And so, even as they were developing, just the simple things that my daughter would just be like amazed by a glass of water. And I'm like, it's a glass of water. I'm like, oh, yes, it's a glass of water. Like you've never seen this before, so some real simple pleasures of joy as well.
Yeah, it's amazing. Look, I'm fascinated about your journey, but I absolutely, of course, have to ask you because Paris is hurtling towards us, and you are the chef de
Yeah.
mission. Hope I've pronounced that correctly. Or do we say chef de mission?
Yeah. Well, in Australia, it's chef de mission. In
It's
France, it's
mission?
chef de mission. Yeah.
Okay, I'm not French. I won't pretend.
Chief of the
Congratulations,
mission.
by the way.
It
What does
translates
it
to
mean
chief
to
of.
you to have that title?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Huge honor. Huge honor. I kind of set my sights on this role when I retired, thinking that in another 10, 15, 20 years' time, it might be possible. I never realized that it would come about so quickly. I'm loving it. I'm loving being the facilitator for the athletes to tell their story. And I really liked your introduction because I really talked to a lot around my belief in the message of what success is. It's not full stop at the end of a gold medal. Yes, that's what we all try to achieve as an athlete, but achieving a silver, achieving a bronze, making a final, personal best, an act of sportsmanship, an act of sportswomanship, making the team are all incredible markers of success. And these are achievements worth celebrating. Our most successful Olympic team has returned 17 gold medals, and that was in Athens in 2004, and that was equaled by our Tokyo team in 2021. And I'll take a team of up to 460 athletes to Paris. So for anyone to feel that 443 athletes don't have stories worth telling, lessons worth teaching, things that can resonate to everyone else in their own challenges in life, I don't believe. There is so much that our athletes can offer us through their stories and through their experiences and through their successes and their losses. They're so important. It's like a coin. There's two sides to a coin. You cannot have one without appreciating and respecting the other. And appreciating and respecting the fact that these athletes and these people are prepared to put themselves in a position where they're judged, they're critiqued, and they may not be successful, but they still go out there and they try and compete. They try and be their best, and they try and be the best. And we need people like that to look up to inspire us to take on the challenges in our own lives. So I'm loving that position as chef to be able to facilitate that.
Oh, man, I am so excited to ask you my final question of the day, but that is coming shortly. What I wanted to ask you on the chef de mission, you're the leader of arguably the most motivated and dedicated group of people on the planet, like Olympians. Like, come on, what is most important for you to impart on them?
I don't necessarily need to impart anything. I just need to understand them, know what they need to be able to come into the games in Paris to perform at their very best, provide that, and then get out of their way. Let them do their job. That's what they're there to do. You know, my job is largely in a support role for them. Yeah.
That's amazing. Look, before we hit the final two, I want to ask you about what it means to be a woman in sport. Now, like, again, I've mentioned my mother so much because she means the world to me, and I'm so proud of, I suppose, the way that she's championed women in sport, and that didn't stop when she became a coach. In fact, it sort of ramped up a bit. And like, I've sometimes seen how exhausting it is for her. Sometimes she's tired and, fighting battles that perhaps I suspect a male wouldn't. So I've seen it, but I feel like we're getting somewhere. So I was consuming everything I could in preparing for today. I saw you present the Matildas with their ticket to Paris. You spoke about this concept. And as our greatest ever track cyclist, you've championed women in sport, of course, the whole way. How important has it been to you to champion this this concept and to encourage young girls to say, hey, like, your gender doesn't matter. Like, you can achieve whatever you want to achieve.
Yeah, nothing's easy. That's first and most important thing. I'm really grateful for the women who preceded me. Because of their efforts, I got to be able to do what I have done. And I do believe I left my sport in a better place than when I entered it, which is, I think, the whole goal. And I really would love to look forward to the day where we don't have to proceed anything, any profession with women in. At the moment, we need it. We need those role models. We need those glass ceiling breakers. And once we get I think we've hit the ground rolling really, really well. And I'm really excited for what the future holds for so many beautiful, big, brave, strong women like my daughter Evelyn.
Yeah. Does it bring extra significance for you because you have a daughter? Like I have friends who have young girls and young daughters, and like you see that they're built up. They're like, oh yeah, I get it. This is important because like forging your way as a young girl in the world, and now you have one.
Yeah, I think it's actually more pertinent to me because I have a son. My son Bill is younger than Evelyn. He's 2. And I think it's as important that my daughter is supported with opportunity as my son is educated in fairness, equality, history, and future. I think it's really important that both my children see that my husband and I are working in a capacity where I am working and my husband is the main carer at home. That's important for both our daughter and our son to see. And our roles as parents has changed over the years because that's what fits our family dynamic, and that's what works for us and what we need at the moment, and that will shift again in time. You do not have to be pigeonholed to anything in particular, least of all because of gender.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic insight, Anna. We're almost at the final 2, I promise. But the last one is the relationship between love and loss. So we kind of touched on it, with your separation, but I sort of look at this one as heartbreaking, but also like so lovely at the same time. I want you to tell me about, if it's okay, Bruce the Beagle, because I was like, my heart was full when I saw some of your videos. And it, of course, was so sad to read, about what happened at the start of this year. But he sounds like the best thing ever.
He was a character, that's for sure. Brucey, he made it to 18 years of age. He was a dog that saw me through every transition and challenge in life. I think he came into my life at the right time. He left my life at the right time. He was my steadying anchor because no matter what I did or did not achieve, he was always happy to see me. He was just, a delight to come home to. He didn't care for any medal or title or anything like that. He just wanted a pat and food. Like, it was just, I used to run him on the bike for 10, 15K because he's a beagle. He's driven by his nose. He's an absolute menace. But at the same time, he was just the best. And I do miss him a lot. He had a lot of fans on social media, and everyone's like, he should have his own social page. I'm like, well, no, because then I would have no followers. If you want to follow him, you follow me. But he's a sad loss. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Thanks for asking. You're the first person that's asked me about Bruce.
Oh, no, my pleasure. Do you know what? I have had the reason I asked was because I've had a newfound respect. I did have a family dog growing up, but I now have my own dog, Gypsy. She's 2 years old. But like, I noticed, like, when I saw it, Bruce was 18. I was like, wow, he must have been there for all the ups, but more importantly, the downs. For me, the last year, like Gypsy, like, it doesn't matter. I come home I might have had the worst day ever, but her tail's wagging and she's jumping up and everything's better. I had to ask, because you've been through so many downs. You've been through a ton of ups, but you've been through so many downs, and our dogs are there the whole way.
Yeah, absolutely. When I broke my neck, Brucey was only he was only 2. He knew something was up, and because I could only lay flat, he started at my feet, and he would slowly move his body up, and as he hit a sore point, he would work around it, and he eventually would just lay on my chest so I could pat him, and that became our thing. And he's only ever done that to a few other people in his 18-year life. That Yeah, so
Yeah.
my now husband can probably thank Bruce for getting a foot in the door, because when he visited on the first occasion, Bruce sat at his feet, and Bruce doesn't like too many men. So Bruce gave him the nod of approval very, very early.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. If you need approval from anyone, yes, mum's important. Yes, siblings are important, but the dog's got to approve.
Dog. Yeah.
um, okay, hey, here we are. So I'm so excited to ask you these two because asking them to Australia's chef de mission carries, I mean, you're not more important than any other person, but it is fascinating with the role that you have. And I'm so excited to hear from you. Anna, what would you tell a young kid, let's say 8 or 9, making their way in this world with so many options ahead of them, whether they want to be an Olympian, an astronaut, an accountant, I don't know, whatever it might be. It's a young person with the world at their feet. What do you tell them?
The first thing I'm going to say or ask is, do I have to tell them anything? I think sometimes our youth have been spoken to, talked at a lot, and sometimes they just need the freedom of exploration and play and fun. And I think that's really important, is to sometimes not necessarily talk, but listen and just be there. If I had to say something to a young child aspiring to be an Olympian, it's, if I had to go back to the young me, I would, be very much along the lines of, you never gave up, you always tried your best, and remember that this is fun, this is what you love. And that's most important, because when it gets really tough, it's that love that you have deep inside, that motivation towards the sport that you're connected to, that keeps you going. So find that love.
Yeah. I've listened in awe to you today. I really have. I mean that wholeheartedly. And I'm, in a way, you've addressed this last one a couple of times, but I sort of wanted to ask you in an official sort of direct capacity, what does success mean to Anna Meares?
Self-fulfillment, I think. Self-fulfillment, self-achievement. And I'm my own measure and judge of that. No one else.
That's brilliant. It is amazing because that comes from, like, listening to you say before that you're about to be in charge of 400 and what did you say, 460 odd athletes?
460 odd.
Yeah, Australia's not going to win 460 gold medals, which means that if success is defined as winning a gold medal, well, we're going to have a lot of failures, which of course is not the case. I think it's amazing that you just highlighted the fact that there is so much more, that it's a two-sided coin, right?
Yeah, it is. Very much so. Yeah.
Amazing. And those stories and those stories and journeys are exactly what, like, I wanted to share on this particular platform. I would do all 460 of their stories if possible, but and I'll leave that in charge of. I'll leave you in charge of that, because you are leading our Australian contingent. Thank you for doing that, because we're excited to watch you in your role as chef de mission. But most importantly, thank you so much for your time today, your openness, your honesty, and the integrity you carry yourself with. For me, that's what I was so inspired by in sitting here listening to you today. I honestly, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for giving us your time. I know how busy this has been for you, but I think the value you provide, not only to Australia's athletes, but to anybody who's been fortunate enough, like me, to hear from you today, is invaluable. So thank you so much. All the best for Paris, and we'll look forward to hearing from you soon.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. It's been a really great chat. Good luck with the rest of the interviews.